In today's video, we're going to be taking a look at a brand new feature that will soon be coming to all rack mount UniFi Dream Machines. And that feature is automatic shadow mode. You may have previously heard about shadow mode, which is an existing feature that allows UniFi Dream Machines to act in a kind of active-passive failover configuration, where you have one Dream Machine constantly replicating its configuration to the other, and in the event of a failure, you can manually swap some cables around to fail over to the other Dream Machine. So it kind of works, but it's not a proper automatic process. You'd have to manually go in and rearrange cables to fail over. Well, with automatic shadow mode, which is coming in UniFi OS 4.0, you will now be able to have full automatic failover, where you can have a pair of Dream Machines constantly running, and if the primary fails, everything will automatically fail over to the secondary, which is absolutely brilliant and is a really good new feature to see. So in this video, we'll take a look at it. So right now, I'm running the alpha version of UniFi OS 4.0. So while we're still running it in development software here, this isn't a full production release yet, it actually does work really well. So let's take a look at it. So for the setup here, we have a pair of UniFi Dream Machine Pro Maxes. Currently, we're only using the top ones. The top one's set up and working, and the bottom one isn't even powered on. And into the top one, we have a WAN connection coming into here, two devices connected, the orange cable goes off to a camera, which is sitting here, which is set up with UniFi Protect, so it's recording that camera, and the yellow cable goes off to a laptop here. And we've got a single hard drive in the Dream Machine, and that's recording that camera. So now if we take a look at the laptop over here, we can see we're in the UniFi controller, so that's all working absolutely fine. I've got a ping here going out to 1.1.1.1, and that's connecting out fine. So we've got a ping going out to the internet, so we're connected to the internet through the UDM. And if we go over to UniFi Protect here, we'll see we'll get a live video feed from that connected camera. So there's the video feed. If I move my hand in front of the camera, you'll see there's my hand moving. So we've got a live video feed going. And if you look back here at the playback, we've got a fair bit of historical footage from the camera sitting here running. So yep, we've got it all working. But of course, if this UDM were to ever go down or fail or lose power or something bad happened to it like that, everything here would stop working. I'd lose the internet connection, UniFi Protect would stop working and stop recording, the UniFi controller would go down, and then any other applications running on the UDM, such as Access or Talk, would also go down. And that's where automatic shadow mode comes in. So let's set it up. So now let's go through the setup process on camera, because I've tried this before, and it is actually really simple to get working. So first of all, if you go into the OS settings on your UniFi Dream Machine, so the top one here, we can see it shows UDM Pro Max, which is the one we're using, and there's an option here for setting up a shadow gateway. So let's try it out. Now the first thing to bear in mind if you're setting up a shadow gateway is that both UDMs do need to be the same model. So if you've got a UDM Pro, your shadow needs to be a UDM Pro. If you've got a UDM SE, shadow needs to be an SE. If you've got a Pro Max like I have here, the shadow needs to be a Pro Max. You can't mix and match them. So just make sure if you've already got one UDM running and you want to buy another one to put it in automatic shadow mode, you need to buy an identical UDM. So let's set this up. So we'll go to click here, set up, and it'll start explaining what to do. Okay, so the shadow UDM is now booted up, just saying plug in cable. So that's now working. So what we now need to do is plug the WAN port on the shadow gateway into one of the LAN ports on the primary. And this is what it says in the instructions here. So just take the LAN port there, plug that into just any of these LAN ports here, and then just let that connect. So just give it a couple of minutes, take a look at the laptop here and wait for a second, and eventually it'll pop up saying that it's found the shadow gateway and asks if I want to set it up. And there we go. So as you can see on the laptop here, it now says a UDM Pro Max is detected, set up shadow mode. We've got it working. So now coming in closer here on the laptop, we can go to click to set up shadow mode, like that, setting up, and straight away it now says in sync. So it now says synchronized a few seconds ago, it now says syncing on the front of the UDM on its little screen there, and now we have shadow mode enabled. But this may look familiar if you've seen other people setting up shadow mode before automatic shadow mode came in. And that's because the process here is currently the same. We're now running in shadow mode, but not automatic shadow mode. So right now the configuration is being synced between the two UDMs, but if the primary were to fail, I would have to manually rearrange cables to switch over to the secondary. So this is where the new feature comes in, which is the automatic failover. And we can set that up now. So to do that, we're going to press enable automatic failover here, and it'll pop up with some instructions. And it's a really nice, easy to use wizard. This works really well. It's dead simple to set up. So as you can see here, the first thing it's telling you to do is put a cable between port 7 on both UDMs. And this is a permanent cable that you'll leave in, and it's what the UDMs will use to sync their configuration on an ongoing basis. And they'll probably also use it for sort of heartbeat type information to check each other's status. So let's set that up. I've got a cable here, so I'll plug one end of that into port 7 on the bottom UDM, the other end into port 7 on the top UDM. Plug those in there, like that. They've now both got a link. And then over here, it has a button for verify. So if we click the verify button, it'll check that connection's in place. You get a little tick because it's connected. Check that link's there. Then we can press next. And now it says it's setting up a high availability cluster. So now we just need to wait a couple of minutes for this to set up, and we'll come back once it's ready. Okay, so that maybe did take a minute or two, but now it says high availability cluster established, and we're now set up. So now let's press next. And now there's some cabling we'll need to rearrange. Because right now, if we take a look over at the UDMs, you can see a bit of a problem. The WAN connection connects to the top UDM, the primary, but then the secondary UDM is getting its WAN connection via the primary. So if the primary failed, well, this loses its internet connection. And likewise, all the clients are currently connected into the primary UDM, so again, if this failed, yes, this would take over automatically, but it would have no clients connected. So we need to rearrange these cables. So the first thing we're going to do is connect the WAN connection into both UDMs. So for that, we're going to need some sort of switch. Now, to test this, I'm just using these cheap little TP-Link switches, but of course you could use something a bit better. You might want to think about some level of switch redundancy as well, both on the WAN side and on the LAN side. There's all sorts of different ways you need to design different redundancy into this, but for now, I'm just going to use this little cheap switch. And what we're going to do is we're going to disconnect this green cable that's linking the two UDMs that we put in initially. We're going to take my WAN connection and plug that up into the switch, like that. And then we're going to connect the cable from the switch into the WAN port on both UDMs. So plug that UDM in there, and then that UDM in there. So as you can see, they're now both connected. So now the WAN connection is connected into both of the Dream Machines. So now we've done that, there's one extra thing worthy of note, and that is if we take a look at the link state LEDs on this switch. We can see that the primary UDM and the uplink to the main network are both linked at gigabit because they've got this green LED, whereas the secondary UDM is only linked at 100 meg because the LED is orange. And that's an important thing to note, because what happens here is that only the WAN interface on the primary UDM actually comes up fully. Sure, the secondary UDM is connected to this switch, but the WAN interface isn't really fully brought up. But when the primary UDM goes down and it fails over, then the WAN interface on the secondary UDM comes up fully. And that's important to bear in mind, because with a lot of residential or basic business connections, you only get one public IP address, or you're using things like PPPoE to connect to the internet. And with those sorts of connections, you couldn't have two UDMs with WAN connections both brought up trying to get an IP address. That's not going to work. So it's really good with this that it only brings up the WAN interface on the primary UDM, or whatever UDM is currently acting as the primary. That means that this will work perfectly fine with even the most basic residential internet connection. You don't need a high-end business connection that has multiple public IP addresses to be able to have automatic failover here. And this is quite a big benefit over using technologies such as CARP or VRRP to fail over two routers, because with those, you're generally going to need three different public IP addresses, one for each gateway, and then the floating IP that will switch between them. But with this, because it only brings up the WAN interface on the primary device, you can use it with really any internet connection, which is really, really good to see. So now that's the WAN side of things sorted, we can press next over here. And then what's also now going to do is tell you to connect your UDMs, both of your UDMs, to any of your switches, because right now, as you can see, what we have here is just both devices plugged into the top UDM. Chances are you've probably got a separate switch, but chances are that switch is also going to just be plugged into a single UDM. So what you'll now need to do is reconfigure your switching so that all your switches are connected to both UDMs. And again, that's what you need to kind of design in and think, is there any kind of switching redundancy you're going to want to implement here? Or are you happy just having a single switch connected to both UDMs? It's really up to you. It's the sort of thing you design yourself based on your own network. But obviously here, this isn't going to work. So we're going to introduce another little switch here as a LAN switch and connect the devices through that. So all we're going to do is take both these devices and plug them both into this switch here. So plug in the laptop and the camera. And then we're going to uplink this switch into both of the Dream Machines. So port 1 on that is going to plug into that switch there. And then port 1 on the top Dream Machine is going to plug into this switch as well. So there we go, we've now got two switches here. This one connects the WAN connection into both Dream Machines, and this switch here connects all my LAN devices also to both Dream Machines. So that setup is now working. We can see the laptop's now refreshed, and we're back online, accessing the Dream Machine. So now if we look over at the laptop here, we can see we're now back in the UniFi controller. If we go up here and look at Protect, we'll see we have a video feed coming from that camera, and that'll be working absolutely fine once it loads up. There we go, video feed's now working. So it's basically working exactly as it did before. So we've just reconfigured it now. Automatic shadow mode's enabled. You can see we've got all the historical recordings here. There'll be slight breaks in there where cables have been unplugged and stuff, but UniFi Protect's up. If we look over here at the ping test, we can see we're still pinging out to the internet. So, yep, everything's still up. And then over here, if we take a look at the screens on both UDMs, you can see the top one just works as normally, the touchscreen all works, but the bottom one just says shadow mode, ready to take over. And it also says how long it's been since it was last synchronized. So it was synchronized 15 minutes ago. That'll be the last sort of synchronization since any real sort of configuration changes that have occurred. So yeah, we're now ready to take over in shadow mode. So now let's go all out and test this. So as you can see here, we've got both UDMs running. We've got UniFi Protect recording in the background. And then on the laptop here, we're just pinging out constantly to the internet so we can see how long the internet connection goes down for while we're failing over. So what I'll now do is I'll just kill power to the top UDM, just completely unexpectedly kill power to it, and let's watch what happens. And what you want to see here is how long the internet connection actually goes out for. So let's do it. There we go, I've killed power. As you can see, pings have stopped going through. We're now getting some timeouts coming through. And if we look over here, we'll see the UDMs starting to fail over. So the green light on this port here has come on here, so the WAN connection's now come up and this link's come up a gigabit link. We're straight away now starting to reply to pings again, so we're only down there for really a couple of seconds. Very, very quick failover. And then if you look down the screen on the secondary UDM, it's now going to be saying that it's taking over. So if we look down here on the screen, we can see it says network online, restoring UniFi. So what it seems to do that makes complete sense is it very, very quickly fails over the internet connection. So the internet connection comes up very, very quickly. And once that's done, it then starts bringing up all the other UniFi applications running on the device. So yep, that's coming back online. And now, as you can see here, it says failover activated. So this UDM is now completely restarted and it's now running all the applications, having taken over from the primary that's powered off. And now, if we look over at the laptop, here we can see we have the UniFi interface opened up. And it looks just like it did before, except it shows the primary gateway is offline, failover is activated here, and it has this warning up here saying that changes during failover will not be replicated back. And this is important to bear in mind, is that when you're running in this failover configuration, so you're running off of your failover UDM, it kind of works read-only, so any changes you make to it won't be replicated back. And as soon as you power on your primary UDM, it will automatically take over again. So it's not a case that it just sort of fails over and then you'll turn on your primary again and the primary will then come back on as a secondary. This will want to switch back to the primary. So you'll turn it back on, it'll power back up, and then the switchover will happen again and you'll switch over back to your primary UDM. So that's just something to bear in mind, is that if you have failed over, your current standby UDM will act in a read-only mode. However, as you can see here, it does say to make permanent changes, first promote the shadow gateway to primary. And this is an option, so what you can do here is you can click shadow gateway here, and there's this option here for promote shadow to primary. What this means is that this UDM will then become a primary UDM, and it will work completely standalone. You can change all the settings and fully use it as if it was your primary UDM. The only thing that's very important to bear in mind here is if you then turn on your primary UDM again, it will come up again as a primary. You'll end up with two primary UDMs on the network, sharing IP addresses, all sorts of things will conflict, and that would be a really bad idea. So, you wouldn't want to promote your shadow to being primary unless your primary is completely dead. So say your primary UDM is completely failed, it's completely out of action and you need to physically replace it, then at that point, absolutely switch your shadow gateway over to primary and start using it. However, if the problem isn't something quite as catastrophic, say you've just lost power to the UDM and you just need to power it up again, in that case, you wouldn't want to promote your shadow to primary. You would just want to bring your primary back online and fail back over to it. If on the other hand, you did decide to switch your shadow over to primary and then later did want to bring your previous primary back online, what you'd want to do is fully unplug all the ports on the front of your previous primary, factory reset it using the reset hole on the front, then power it on, and then go through the shadow mode setup process again to make your old primary your new shadow. And that would work completely fine. So it's just important to bear that in mind, is while you're running a shadow gateway mode, your shadow is read only, and then if you switch your primary back on, you'll switch back over to primary automatically, and you can switch your shadow to be a primary gateway, but in that situation, you then wouldn't want to power on your previous primary, or if you did, you'd want to factory reset it first. But yeah, that's all now working. And now, with that all working there, if we go here, we can close that there, go into Protect, and we'll be able to see if UniFi Protect is working. And there we go. As you can see, UniFi Protect is now recording. That is now working absolutely fine. So we failed over the full UniFi application stack, UniFi controllers failed over, UniFi Protect's failed over, and all the internet connections failed over. However, there is one limitation of this to bear in mind. And we can see if we go over to playback here, we don't have any footage from before the UDMs failed over. And that's the one limitation that I found with UniFi Automatic Shadow Mode, is that UniFi Protect footage isn't replicated. So yeah, that's something to bear in mind. If you fail over to your other gateway, your footage will still record, all your footage will start being recorded to your shadow gateway, but any footage that was on the primary gateway won't be accessible from your shadow gateway. So as a final step, what we'll do is we'll take a look at how you can access footage that was stored on your primary using your secondary gateway. So this process isn't particularly high tech. What we need to do is swap the hard drive out of the primary UDM into the shadow gateway. So what we'll do is we'll go over to the storage page just so we can see it happening live. So with storage here, we can see it's running with that hard drive. And what we need to do is take the hard drive out of the shadow gateway, like that there. Then we also need to take the hard drive out of the primary. Now, of course, in a standard failover situation, you're probably not really going to need to do this. What we're looking at here is a situation where your primary gateway has failed, you've failed over to your shadow gateway, but for some reason you need to access a piece of footage from your primary gateway. You need to find, there was an incident that happened that was recorded on the primary gateway, but you only had the need to retrieve that footage after the primary gateway had gone down. So we need to take the hard drive out of the primary gateway, put it in the secondary gateway, just so we can access that historical footage. Chances are that sort of situation should be quite rare, so it's not really a common task to be doing this. But as you can see, we've now disconnected both hard drives, and on the UDM it now says disk not found. So what we'll do is we'll take the hard drive out of the shadow gateway, put it off the side so we don't get them mixed up, then take the hard drive that has the footage we want out of the primary, which for this case, this example has failed, and put this hard drive into the shadow gateway. So we'll put that in there and wait for a couple of seconds for it to be recognised in the software. So now after a few seconds, it's now detected the hard drive and it says storage not initialized. All available disks contain unrecognized existing data. So at this point you could press reformat and it would reformat that drive, but then you'd lose all the data on it. That's not what we want to do. What we want to do is access the footage off it. So it says here, what you need to do is gracefully restart the console to attempt to initialize the storage using existing data. So that's all we need to do. So you need to restart this UDM. So we're going to go to console settings, down to restart, and press restart. So of course this will now take down your primary UDM, well the UDM that's currently acting as the primary. So this is the sort of thing you'd want to do out of hours, but it is completely possible. So what we'll now do is we'll wait for this UDM to restart and see if we can access that historical footage. Okay, so it's now been a couple of minutes and the UDM's restarted. So as you can see, if we come into here, refresh that, the UDM is up. We can go into storage here and we'll see it's now saying storage is healthy, so the storage is back up, it's recognised that hard drive and it's now using it. And then if we come into protect here, we'll see it's actively working again. We're getting live video from the camera. But if we go to playback, what we'll now see is we can now access that historical footage. So jump a bit back in time. Here we have the footage that is currently recorded after being restarted. So we can see here in the footage, the top UDM is missing its hard drive because that's footage that's been recorded now. But we can now jump back in time to this section here. And this is back from before we failed over, because as you can see in this, the top UDM, you just might make out, is actively running. So that there is the footage that was being recorded by this primary UDM while it was still in operation. So we're now able to access that historical footage that was recorded by the primary UDM using the secondary. So yeah, that works. So what I'll now do as a final test is I'll just test failing back over. So I'll put a hard drive back into the primary UDM just so they've both got hard drives, and then we'll power the primary UDM back on and watch us fail back over from the current standby UDM that's acting that is currently live, and we'll fail back over and the primary UDM will finally become live again. Okay, so we're now ready to fail back. So as you can see, I've got the ping test going again, so we can see how long the internet connection goes out for. The primary UDM is currently powered off, and the standby is currently running. So what we'll now do is we'll power on the primary UDM and let this boot back up, and we'll see what happens in terms of the internet connection going down. Okay, so as you can see here, we've dropped a single ping, so that's now failed back over to the primary. And as you can see here, the LEDs have once again switched over on here, so that the WAN link on the secondary UDM has dropped down to 100 meg, so it's disconnected essentially, and the WAN connections come up on the primary. So we're now being routed by the primary UDM. And we only dropped a single ping, so that was very, very quick switchover. Now we can see here that the primary UDM is still booting up, still probably starting all those UniFi applications, but we've basically failed over. And then the secondary one now here says ready to take over, so it's now gone back into standby mode, or shadow mode as they call it. So I'm going to give it a little bit longer for all the applications to start up. We're back into UDM, everything's working fine, storage shows up as healthy. I then go into protect, and up comes protect, and we're getting live video from the camera again. So that's worked. I've been able to completely kill the primary UDM, fail over to the secondary, access footage from that was recorded on the primary using the secondary, and then switch back over to the primary again. So yep, it works absolutely brilliantly. So there you have it. That was a look at the brand new automatic shadow mode that's soon to be coming to all rack mount UniFi Dream machines. And it works really, really well. This is a feature that people have been requesting for a very long time, and this implementation is really, really good. Super easy to set up. It's great that it's compatible with sort of all standard internet connections, and it just works exactly as I expected it to. No issues at all. So yeah, I hope you found this interesting or useful, or you're just sitting there eagerly waiting for this to come out in a production release. But all that's left to say now is thank you very much for watching.